that leaves no listener behind.
And now, it's For the People with Judge Herb Dodell.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to talk about judges. Not that all judges are good or all judges are bad, but there's a mixture. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because I try to encourage people to settle their cases. You've heard me say that if you've listened to any of these previous shows. And by the way, we now have an index on the website. So
Cool.
If you have a particular subject that you're interested in, whether it's DUI or landlord or small claims, go to the index and just click on what it says there, and you'll get the show that deals with that subject matter. So you don't have to go poke around looking to see what you like or whatever.
That's on your website, correct?
On my website, which is judgeherbdodell.us. And you click on radio. There's three little things at the top. You click on that, and it says radio shows. You go to radio shows, and all the contents, not all the contents, brief summary of what the context of each show is, are listed for all the 19. I think this is the 20th show that we're doing.
Wow.
So it's all there.
Yeah, and plus you're on YouTube.
And I'm getting inquiries too. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today was the question of what judges do.
Yeah, what do they do? You're a judge, right?
But I oftentimes think that I can say what, quote, judges do, but that's not so. Everybody is different.
Yeah.
And I wanted to comment on the Stormy Daniels case because we talked about it last week.
Right.
And there was a motion made by Stormy's lawyers to take discovery. Discovery meaning the deposition of the president. And that motion was denied.
You said it would be, I think.
Yeah, well, I still think that I got the right analysis. You'll never know until something happens.
Yeah.
But the purpose of telling the story is that you can get an indication early on in any case, truly, where that judge is going. People always say, do judges really make a difference? They make all the difference in the world. And I think I told a story, which I'll probably repeat today, about what judges can do, keeping evidence out, letting evidence in, keeping evidence out, what the jury is told, the case is about. The judges are in control of the entire operation.
Well, I think of O.J. Simpson and, those tapes and the Furman thing and all that. He kept some of it out. He kept a lot of things out, actually. So, judges have complete control over what goes in the case and what goes out of the case, right?
That's right, because I used the word, it's not my word, it's called discretion.
Mm-hmm.
When judges make a ruling that's a discretionary ruling to give or not to give something or to let something in or not, and it's a discretionary call, and you can find out what's discretionary versus what is mandatory by the statutes and by the cases which define what comes in and what doesn't come in. And so the bottom line is the judge makes a discretionary call. Can you appeal? What do you think?
I'm sure you can. But, yeah, you're not going to get anywhere.
Most of the time, you're not going to get anywhere. Most of the time.
You can't appeal it, though.
On discretionary calls,
yes,
you have to prove, as the party, you have to prove that the discretionary call was arbitrary and capricious. Those are the words that come out of the cases. In other words, they abused the discretion. But that's a very tough burden. Historically, courts of appeal tend to affirm decisions made by the trial judges. I guess it's about 20% of the cases get reversed, which is a sizable number.
That is, actually.
But it's very hard. I think I told the story of the drunk judge. Did I tell you about the drunk judge?
The drunk judge?
The drunk judge.
No, I didn't hear about the drunk judge.
It was interesting because I was in court. That's why I'm wearing the jacket. I'm wearing the tie. And
yeah, you're looking
shirt.
all sharp and dapper today.
Yeah, I was dressed for the.
Well, were you in court today?
I was.
What were you
Tomorrow,
not as a judge then?
No, tomorrow I'm on the bench.
Okay, so
today I was in the trench.
So you're in the trench as
I was
as
in
a
the
lawyer.
trench. Yeah, and you know what? I observed things, and I said to myself, my God, I can't really speak for the whole community. Some of these judges do whatever they want to do, and that really is the reason why you should settle your cases.
Do you like being in the trench or on the bench?
I don't like the trench.
You don't like the trench anymore. You like the bench.
Absolutely. You find yourself talking sweet and nice and everything else when you don't really feel that
right.
way, You're getting your knuckles wrapped and you got to keep on smiling, like you're not getting beaten up. And you're getting beaten up.
Of course. I know the feeling.
Well, I may even tell the story. But the fact is that you don't know when you're a litigant, whether it's a criminal case or a civil case, who your judge is in the beginning.
Who's the drunk judge? Tell us.
Oh, you want to know about the drunk judge?
Yeah, I want to hear about the drunk judge.
Oh, that's because I was in Riverside, and this case happened in Riverside.
You're in Riverside today?
I was.
Okay.
And this took place 36 years ago, about 2 weeks ago, because I remember because my daughter was born during that trial when I was in trial in Riverside.
Wow.
Both of my kids were born during trials.
That's interesting.
Yeah, never quite did a correlation to that, but maybe.
Who knows?
But there certainly was no dispute. This was pure joy. But I go to trial.
Okay.
And it was a case against an insurance company and an insurance company attorney, and they were really pushing these people around. They really taking advantage of what it was all about. And there was no regular judges available, so the presiding judge assigns us to this guy, right? Retired judge.
Oh, he's retired, huh?
Retired judge.
That's right, I was.
Now, the presiding judge used to work for one of the very, very big insurance companies. That's what he was. He was a defense lawyer. The guy that he appointed, guess what that guy did?
Same thing?
That's exactly what he did.
That's right, I did.
And he was also, that's good. You're going to get to that part.
Thank you.
And you're great, Gary, really. You bring such spice to the show.
Thank you, Judge.
So the bottom line is they assign us to this guy. I don't know who this guy is from.
You don't know my name?
No.
Okay.
I'll never forget his name. So we're trying the case, and as the plaintiff, you go first. Put on your case and whatever it is.
Right.
And a defendant has a right to make what's called a non-suit motion.
Which is what?
A non-suit motion means that even if everything you say is true, you can't win. There's insufficient evidence for you to carry your burden or whatever the circumstances turn out to be at that moment, right? We put on a great case. Had a good jury. They make a motion. And before they make the motion, I'm watching this judge. He's standing up and he's walking around. We don't have a lot of room up there, believe it or not.
Right.
You got the stairs and you got maybe 3-4 feet on each side. You haven't got a lot of walking around room. So he's getting up and he's walking around. So when we have to make a motion or something, you ask to approach. You say, "May I approach, Your Honor?" Like nobody's going to say no.
Sure.
Come on up,
Come on
so
up,
I go up,
Judge.
and this guy stunk.
He stunk,
he
really?
smelled of alcohol the worst. This guy was he was nodding off. That's why he was standing up and walking around. And he was bad. He was really bad. He wasn't as bad until he made the decision. Then he was worse.
What do you do about something like that?
So what we did is after he threw the case out in front of the jury, and by the way, I spoke to those jurors afterwards. They were inclined, based on just the plaintiff's case, it was a solid case. They were inclined to give him $2 million.
Wow.
He took it all away.
Damn.
He threw the case out. Granted a motion for a non-suit, which didn't exist, but he did it anyway.
It's happy hour, Judge.
It was early. I think his happy hour began early in the morning.
That's right.
he was very happy. So if you want to make a motion for a new trial, you have to make the motion in front of the same judge that threw your case out to begin with. I mean, is that genius or brilliant? You know, that's who you got.
That makes sense.
So I went out and I got declarations, which I'll tell you all about right after the break. If you got any questions, if you want to know about these cases,
Sure I do.
get into Ask Judge Herb at gmail.com.
AskJudgeHerb@gmail.com. We'll be right back.
I don't want you to get disruptive.
AM KCAA.
Herb Dodell is a lawyer and a judge for the people. Having served as a Superior Court judge, presiding over more than 9,000 cases, he has witnessed firsthand how complicated and corrupt the legal system can be. His goal is to show how things really work in the legal system so that people can navigate the legal system in the best way for them. Many people often feel marginalized by the legal system and are uninformed about how to proceed when unfortunate circumstances arise in their life. Judge Herb will pull back the curtain, lift the veil, so people can truly understand their rights, have access to top legal personnel that they can trust, and have knowledge about how things work so they can make better choices. Judge Herb isn't just knowledgeable. His integrity and spiritual values are truly what make him different. He cares about democratizing access and information for all and desires to turn on the light so the people, you, can benefit. For more information, email the judge at askjudgeherb@gmail.com. That's askjudgeherb@gmail.com.
Okay, so what I do is I go over to the court reporter, because that's not a regular, because it's just judges being appointed or signed for that particular case. So he didn't have a real affiliation with the court personnel.
Right.
And I spoke to the clerk. And both of them, I said, you know, he stinks. I mean, this guy is, you know, you've seen it too. And they said, yeah, we know he's drunk. And they were also concerned because they have to make records of everything, and he was like flopping his face into the bench.
He was really that bad.
He was really that drunk.
Wow.
And so I knew I had to make a motion in front of him. So there's no chance, zero chance of that happening.
Yeah.
But I took declarations, statements under oath from the court reporter and from the clerk, so it didn't look like I was just somebody coming in and complaining, crying wolf, or just an unhappy litigant, or whatever it is. I got these declarations from these two people, very credible people.
Of course.
And I made a motion in front of another judge, took a shot. And that judge was a smart guy. He says, you're not going to get a fair hearing in front of him. I said, that's right, I'm not. This guy granted my new trial. He was shortly thereafter, maybe the next year or so, he was elevated to the federal bench. He was a very bright guy, nice. He saw what was going on.
Well, I mean, listen, when you get declarations from the court reporter and from the clerk of the court, and they say that he's drunk, isn't that like some sort of, can he get disbarred or something like that, or thrown off the bench?
He was retired.
Right, so nothing would happen to him.
Nah, nothing really was going to happen to him. So let me go on with the rest of the story. It's not a happy ending.
I'm sure it isn't.
They take it up on appeal, the people, prosecution. Take it up on appeal. It's going to be heard in I guess it's the 4th Circuit, 4th District Court of Appeals in San Bernardino. I go out to San Bernardino. Now I got a new trial coming. I'm a happy camper, especially since I had spoken to the jury, and knew what the leanings were of at least one panel of jurors. Go to San Bernardino to argue it, and the justices, and I use that word really loose, said, you know, He is one of the most outstanding members of our community. He was a legislator. How dare you impugn his integrity?
Wow.
All on the record.
Wow.
And they reversed the new trial.
Oh, my God.
How dare you impugn the integrity of this person? And so the purpose of the story really is that you're out of control. Most of the time, you don't know what these people are going to do.
I mean, so they even though this guy was drunk on the bench.
Not a question.
And you had declarations from the court.
Yep.
They still overthrew it.
The Court of Appeals.
The Court of Appeals overthrew it.
And they can do pretty much whatever they want to. In fact, I read an opinion not too long ago where the presiding justice, and this was in the Ninth Circuit Federal Court, threw something in. It was really not relevant, just to hurt somebody. It was absolutely irrelevant to the issue. And his comment was, well, if this had happened, this would have been the result. Well, it didn't happen, so you don't have a result. But he wanted to make a ruling that would stick on the record that might be usable by the other side somewhere down the road. So when you say the judges take sides, they do. They really do. And I was also thinking, I was over one of the court buildings not too long ago, saw some of my colleagues walking in the hall, and I said to myself, these people were not really capable of practicing, let alone being on the bench. And so when you think, because a person becomes a judge, that means they're smart or they're able to do all of these things, not necessarily correlated. That's another reason why you need to settle a case.
I mean, but honestly, I mean, you're talking about civil cases. What about criminal cases?
Same thing.
Settle it?
Settle it. Please bargain it out.
How if you're not guilty?
Well, I think I mentioned the illustration maybe last week. If you're sitting in the room with the DA and you're a lawyer and they say, you know what, we've alleged in count 1 crime that will carry 20 years. 20 years. Count 2, 15 years. And then you work your way down. On the other hand, it could be considered what we call a wobbler. And if that happens, it's a misdemeanor. What would you like to do? You want to go to trial? You want to roll those dice for the 20 years? Or would you like to take 90 days in the camp?
Well, I mean, if you're going from dropping it from a felony to a misdemeanor, I mean, I could see doing something like that possibly.
Well, you still have a criminal record. Misdemeanor is still a crime.
I know. But I'm saying, rolling the dice for 20 years to 90 days.
It happens all the time.
I bet.
You know what the biggest risk is in criminal cases for co-defendants? What do you think the biggest risk is?
I don't know. I really don't.
One flips.
One flips on the other person.
Right.
Yeah.
The best you can do then, and we're going to talk about some trial strategies maybe a little bit today.
Okay.
All you can do is attack the idea that he made a deal.
Yeah,
she made a deal,
yeah.
Whatever the deal was.
Yeah, the credibility.
But you know what? It doesn't work most of the time.
Man, this is scary to hear, Judge.
Oh, it's terrible. I didn't tell you the story about how I got locked up in Chino one time.
Chino, you got locked up?
I tried this case. No. I tried this case in Van Nuys. He was a very good judge too, by the way.
Okay.
I remember he was a good guy. My guy was accused of selling and distributing bags of cocaine, a serious amount. They were found in the bottom of a box. The top of the box were all regular glasses. So they figured, nobody would know what's in the hidden part, right?
Yeah.
So he gets busted with all of this coke. And I had to put him on the stand, actually. It's one of the few times I put a defendant on the stand.
By the way, you normally you never put a defendant on the stand.
I shouldn't say never.
I'm saying
rarely did I. Rarely did I.
Yeah.
I used to worry that jurors would say, well, he's not testifying because he's really guilty.
Right.
And he should, if he was really innocent, he should be telling the story to us and whatever. I worried about that in the first couple of years that I was out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't pay attention.
Doesn't matter, does it?
No.
Right.
You argue the constitutional right not to have to testify.
Yeah.
But you don't put them on the stand because, number one, they may not be ready for the cross-examination from an experienced, and they know about all the inconsistencies. They've dug and they're prepared to go ahead with it.
Right.
And so, also, if they have prior felony convictions. You can argue that they're too remote. It was 20 years ago, Judge. He was only 19, whatever it is. You can argue that. And you can make what's called a beagle motion, like the dog. Beagle?
Mm-hmm.
You can make a beagle motion to keep it out, but you're rolling the dice. You don't know again, it's that judge is going to decide whether they're going to let it in or they're not going to let it in. You can't afford, as a defense lawyer, you can't afford to have your client up there admitting to 2 felony convictions.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't
help.
It doesn't play well.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
And so you do whatever you need to do. So you think about, well, 20 years versus a misdemeanor, people will actually admit to crimes they never committed because that's the deal.
That's crazy.
You have to do what's called an elocution.
Yes.
After the trial is over, if you make a plea agreement, the court will require you to admit liability,
right?
Admit responsibility. And at that point, they could even have all the victims come in. They can parade a whole group of people in there saying how it's affected their lives. That's all considered. The same thing for restitution.
By the way, I want to ask you a question. Let's say you do a plea deal with the DA, the district attorney, and then they do parade all these people. Drop it to a misdemeanor, and then they do parade.
Well, you don't have to go there. When you have a plea deal, it's different.
But what I'm saying, you have to go before the judge. Can the judge change the sentencing? On the plea deal.
Judges don't have to approve the plea deal.
That's what I'm saying.
They could say it's not enough.
Right. They can.
And they do.
Wow.
It's not enough. I want them to plead to capital murder. Whatever.
What?
But there are a lot of people who have admitted to crimes that they didn't commit.
That's crazy.
But it's started off the conversation today by talking about the fact that these are discretionary calls.
Right.
I had a guy who was accused of insurance fraud.
Yes.
And they had very, very high bail. Very high bail. And I went in to argue, well, he's not a threat. He's not leaving the community. He's a righteous guy and all this other stuff. Got nowhere.
Just
nowhere.
And you can't really do anything.
And it was wrong decision for that judge to make.
Yeah.
But they do. Because you really have what I guess I referred to it many, many shows ago. A friend of mine who was a judge said, some of these guys think that they've been anointed instead of appointed.
Right.
Along with the territory goes that feeling of power, and it really does exist.
Was the person, the judge, was she or he mean, or were they nice?
No, very pleasant.
Very pleasant.
Very pleasant.
And just wouldn't budge off of it.
Well, sometimes when they're too nice, you gotta be concerned. The shoe's gonna drop on you. There's an old adage. If you're getting all the rulings in a trial,
yeah,
you got a likelihood you're going to lose.
Why is that?
Because the judges are making the record so that there's no appeal on the decision. They already know what they're going to do.
Right.
Oh, and they'll bend over backwards to make it feel good. I'm not speaking about myself now, because I take it really seriously.
No, I know you do.
Well, I'm not saying I'm any saint, but I take it much more seriously, I think, than some. Because I've been watching what some of these judges have been doing.
Well, you're on both sides of the fence.
I am.
You're still doing,
I'm still doing every now and again in the trench.
Right, you're in the trench every now and then. You see it. You see what's going on, and that's wicked, man. That's scary.
And you got to be on your best behavior.
Yeah.
So now I know when people come in my court and they're so nice to me. It's not because they love me. It's because they're hoping to get some results.
Well, listen, I think when you go to court, and I've been to court a few times, it's called respect of the court. So we respect the court.
Well, I think everybody pretty much does that.
Yeah. Well, what about this Chino and being thrown in jail?
Oh, so the end of the story is you got me distracted.
I know. I was distracted.
So
everybody.
I put him on the stand, and he testifies. I don't know there's cocaine in here. I'm just delivering a box from my friend.
Right.
And the friend comes in, and he flipped.
Oh.
He testifies. My guy knew about it. He was part of the deal, the whole 9 yards. So you can imagine, of course, that the guy's convicted.
Right.
Right. And he's sentenced.
Yeah.
Sentenced to Chino. No, he ended up fighting fires up in Northern California.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The other guy, the guy that turned, who originally was a co-defendant, was in Chino.
Okay.
And I get this phone call one day. He says he's discovered God, and God told him to tell the truth.
Oh, wow.
So I said, okay, I'll come out and visit with you. I'll tell you about my visit, which is a very interesting afternoon. When I get back from the show. I'm not getting to some of the things I wanted to get to, but we'll cover it at time.
Like cow dung in Chino, right?
We'll get to it in a minute.
All right, it's Judge Herb Dodell. Get his book, From the Trench to the Bench, now available on Amazon. And also to ask the judge a question, go to askjudgeherb@gmail.com. We'll be back with Judge right after this.
NBC Talk Radio, 1050 AM, KCAA.
In his book, From the Trench to the Bench, Judge Herb Dodell demystifies the legal system, including both civil and criminal, the lawyers, the judges, and the process. As a judge, former deputy district attorney, and criminal defense attorney, he knows the legal system. He has the inside information that you need to pick a lawyer, and he's here to give it to you. No matter what you're facing that makes you think you may need a lawyer, Judge Herb will shed valuable light on your situation and reveal your best options and many secrets of how the judicial system actually works. To find out more about how the legal system really works, you can get your copy of Judge Herb Dodell's eye-opening book, From the Trench to the Bench, at Amazon.com.
Okay, we're back. So I call, the guy calls me, and
I seen God.
he did. He was very convincing. He realized that he had done wrong, and my guy didn't know. He was giving me the story. So I said, I'm going to come out and visit with you. So I drive out to Chino, which is the state prison.
Right.
And I go in. It's like it's an office when you start out. And the way it works is they have two sets of bars. One set of bars is separated by space of maybe 8-10 feet. So when one set opens, the other one is closed. And when they never open at the same time.
Right.
And so here I am walking with my little briefcase. This is a long time ago. Walking with my little briefcase. And I'm going to go see this guy, right? So they said, okay, you're going to go to the library. They have a library. So I'm just going to pat you down, and they check to see you're not doing anything or carrying anything, whatever. So I'm now, the one gate opens up. I walk in. I'm in the space between the two gates, and all of a sudden the alarm goes off. Prison riot.
Oh, you're kidding me.
So they close both gates. There I am, standing between the bars on both sides. And I'm saying to myself, I'm locked in.
You're locked in. And the sirens are going
off.
Oh,
the whole thing is going on. So I'm standing in there, and they watch you through this glass booth.
Right.
And the guy's saying, there's no place to sit down. I mean, you're standing in between the bars.
Yeah.
So the alarm goes off. They let me out. I got directions to go to the library. And I'm walking down the hallway, and all these prisoners with all the outfits on, they're walking with me.
Really?
They're not even locked up.
Are you kidding me?
I'm telling you.
Oh, my God.
I'm saying to myself, this kid's going to get jumped on.
Yeah.
Here I'm walking with a briefcase. So I go see the guy, right? Yeah. And I really went there because I wanted to get a signed declaration.
Right.
And I couldn't do that over the phone. So I had brought my pad. And I interview him, and he tells me how he's been saved and everything religious and everything else. And I said, okay, would you mind? I'm going to write what you're saying down. And if it's true, I want you to sign it because I'm going to make a motion to the court to set aside the conviction. Newly discovered evidence. So I write down everything he said, legitimately what he said, and I have him sign it and date it. And I go back to Van Nuys where the trial was held. Oh, his name was Judge Devich. He was a good guy, Bob Devich. I go back in front of him and he says to me, Herb, These people do this all the time. They go to prison and they find God. If I granted every one of these, nobody would ever stay convicted. So he denied my motion.
Oh, he did all that.
The guy ended up doing fighting fires up in Northern California.
Oh my God!
but it's also an indication. See,
at least you tried, Judge. I gotta give you credit. At least you tried.
I was very aggressive.
That's very cool.
As a lawyer, in both civil and criminal.
That's cool.
I was always very aggressive.
That's good to hear.
If you don't ask, you don't get.
Right.
You know, sometimes you go out there and you push the envelope a little too far, but
it's okay.
You really never know what's going to happen.
You never know.
The point of this whole story, all these stories, is don't gamble. You're gambling because you don't know who that judge is. You sure as hell don't know who the jury is going to be.
Yeah.
You know, I had a jury who just wanted to go home for the weekend.
Like OJ's?
Well, this one was even more tragic because that jury never wanted to be there. Like most juries don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And they were stuck there. And you give them a 3-week trial estimate. And as closer you get to the end of the estimate, the more they're itching to get up and go home.
Right.
And so during the 3-week trial, we argued it on a Friday, and it was out of state. And I got on the plane, and I landed in Burbank, and my co-counsel was on the phone. The jury's back. I said, how could that be back? They had 150 exhibits. I mean, it was 2 hours from the time I got to the airport. Impossible.
Wow.
They came back adversely. We won, but we didn't win anything near what it was really worth.
Yeah.
And so I said, there's something wrong here. How could they possibly have gone through all this evidence? But one of them said they were going on vacation the following. I said, there's something caca here. So I hired a private investigator to go and interview the jurors who were on our side. And they told her, and then she told me, that they asked the bailiff how long these things take. And the bailiff said, an hour or two should be plenty.
Are you kidding me?
That was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They were back by 4.
That's ridiculous.
And walked. And she says, I wanted to deliberate, but they refused. They said, we're going home. One juror said, I don't really care about these people. I'm going home.
Is there anything you can do about that?
We did. We made a motion for a new trial.
I hope so. I mean, you want a glass of water? You want to get a glass of water? I'm just curious. I mean, do you think, and I always thought this might help the judicial system a little bit, because, I mean, nobody wants to be on a jury. They don't pay anything. You're out of work. You lose money out of work, things like that. Don't you think that maybe the states and federal government should pay jurors a little bit more so they want to be there, or subsidize their lost pay or something like that? Wouldn't that make it more fair and more equal, and that people would actually want to be on a jury? I actually got a jury notice last year, and I was like, I was dreading doing it.
I was looking forward to it. I got a notice too.
Yeah.
I showed up.
Well, you're a judge and you're an attorney. You like that stuff.
It was interesting.
But don't you think they should be paid a little bit more? Don't you think there should be? There's got to be some sort of.
I'm not so sure about that.
No?
I'd have to think about that.
All right.
But I picked, and I'm in the box, and they asking all the questions and everything else.
They
and
threw
what do
you
you
out.
what do you do?
He threw you
I said,
out.
I'm sitting down the hall.
Exactly.
I was the judge in that same building.
And you actually went
down the
there.
hall.
Oh, Judge,
so the guy kicked me off.
Of course he did.
One guy kicked me off. And I saw him afterwards. Later on, it was an unlawful detainer case.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in unlawful detainers.
Yeah.
So I would see this guy all the time.
Come on.
I would thank him. I said, I'm glad you didn't pick me. Stuck for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
On a case.
Exactly.
People. The most frequent question that I'm asked is, when people get a jury notice, how do I get out of it?
Exactly.
I can't count the number of times people have asked me that. So you know what? I'd love to be on a jury. It's a civic duty.
No, I get it.
We really should do it.
I don't.
But everybody's looking for a way out.
Well, I mean, because listen, they make it so unpleasant. You got to be down there at 8 a.m. You have to. You don't know how long you're going to be there. You can't plan anything in your day. I mean, they make it tough to be a juror.
It's better now. Because now, at least here in Southern California, you can call in the night before.
Yeah, that's what I did.
and you call in and they say show up or don't show up. And if you won't go through a whole week without being called to come down,
You're done.
You're done for the year.
Well, guess what? This is very cool because I called. I guess there's a number you can call to find out about being a juror and what it entails and stuff like that. And the guy was very cool, and he told me, listen, postpone it to a week that it's a short week. So I actually it was in October that I was last October, and they said, try to get on the jury for the week of Thanksgiving. It's only 3 days. They don't. They rarely call you, and boom, you can just skate. So if it's just a tip for people out there that don't want to be on juries, do it on a holiday week.
I don't know if that really works.
It did. I'm telling you,
it worked for you.
It worked for me, anyways.
But the point is, it still goes back to the same basic premise, and that is why gamble.
Yeah.
Who would have ever figured that this jury would want to go home? They would ask the bailiff, and it would leave. And so the answer to your question about what happened is we made a motion for a new trial in front of the judge, whose bailiff it was that did it. So we didn't get anywhere with that.
Yeah.
We took it up to the Court of Appeals, and it was reversed. New trial was granted. They took it up to the Supreme Court, and it was reversed again.
Really?
Yeah. They said, it was no big deal. They told him.
So a bailiff tells them only to stick around for a couple hours, and that's no big deal?
Said an hour or two would be plenty. That's a quote.
I mean, come on, man. That's ridiculous.
Well, it means that you can't gamble on the outcome of a jury. I told you the story about the juror said they hated this person, and they were going to get even with him. They hated some lawyer, and they got even with him. One jury told me that they didn't give money to somebody because they were afraid the son would steal it. I mean, it's the process has a lot of holes in it, and so if you're going to go in front of a jury, civil or criminal,
yeah,
you have no clue, and you think that the jurors, some of the jurors, as a trial lawyer, you sit there and you're looking at the jury all the time. You want to see if they do anything, if they're sitting with their arms spread out, they're open. If they're sitting there like this, you need to be concerned. And so the bottom line is you're watching them all the time.
Yeah.
And judges knock themselves out to patronize the jurors' needs. Extra breaks, whatever it is. The first thing that a judge thinks about is protecting the jury and not inconveniencing them. That's really true. And so you watch the jury and you say to yourself, oh, they look great. This guy he's my guy. I can watch him. He's smiling whenever I do it. Bury you at the end.
It's sort of like acting, I guess.
It is. There was one.
That's nuts.
There was one guy I used to see him in the men's room. I go to a different floor because I don't want to be in contact with any jurors. Well, I can't. As a judge, we have a private bathroom.
Right.
So we don't. They don't want us to be in contact with anybody else.
Yeah.
And I remember this goes back a long, long way. There was a guy that would be standing next to you, and he would smile and you would smile, a nice day and all of that. The guy killed the defendant in that case. You thought, wow, he's my guy, right? Not his guy. I had one juror who was doing that and was going to give me the thumbs up. All the time, during the trial, you give me a thumbs up.
Get out of here.
Honest. And then when the other side was on. The other side was very annoying. He objected to everything, every question, and these people didn't want to be there.
Of course.
And when you're objecting to every question, which is a strategic thing,
yeah,
the only reason you object is to make a record. But if you keep objecting and they hear it and they are sitting there looking at their watches, and it's just lunchtime or whatever, they're gonna get even with you. And so when the other guy was going on, and it was an arson fire, I would look over at this guy. I don't want to mention his name, but I remember him, really remember him very well. And he was sleeping.
He's sleeping?
Sleeping.
The juror was?
Yeah. When I was up, it was like this. Big thumbs up, thumbs up. We won that case. The jury just didn't like the other lawyer.
Right.
He was so annoying, and I was more friendly or whatever.
Right.
And that juror became a client of mine years later.
Wow.
Called me
really?
up one day out of the blue. I remembered him. He had a cane. He was a really nice man.
That's funny.
And you, as a plaintiff's lawyer, you want people with canes.
If a jury gives a thumbs up, can he get disqualified during the trial or something like that?
Well, if the judge sees it, the judge is going to say,
Nobody saw
"Don't."
it?
No, he was in the front row. He was in the front row, and he was sound asleep when the other guy was up. Absolutely sound asleep. And my client was not that terrific.
Right.
He was not he was definitely not lovable.
Right.
But it's like the one we talked about. They gave us the whole amount we asked for.
Yeah.
That jury hated the defendants.
Yeah.
So if people say, does emotion get involved with jurors? Absolutely. Do
Interesting.
they like you? Do they not like you? Makes all the difference in the world. And you don't know in advance what's going to happen, so you better get your case settled.
Okay. Don't gamble.
Tomorrow I'm going to talk to my mediator, see if I can get him to come in here. You know, it's the bureaucracy. Doing radio shows is not on the regular agenda. But I'm gonna see if I can get him to come in here. He's a great mediator.
Okay. Did you ever meet a
Is that it?
lawyer that was for the people?
We're on a break.
Someone who had the best interests of the people at heart. Herb Dodell has been a lawyer for more than 50 years and has been a Superior Court judge for 9 years, having presided over more than 9,000 cases. In this show, he will reveal the secrets of how things really work in the legal system, so you can maximize your position and benefit most when you're in trouble and need someone on your side to simplify the process for you. For more information, email the judge at askjudgeherb@gmail.com. That's askjudgeherb@gmail.com.
And by the way, Gary, when you get lawyers together and they talk to each other, they're called war stories.
I know my dad. My dad was a lawyer.
You hang out. Hey, did you hear about this and this is what happened and this happened? You know, it's amazing what lawyers will say about the cases. I did tell the story once. I was a member of a trial lawyers organization, and we had a regular dinner one night.
Let me ask, were you ever a part of the Footprinters by any chance?
No.
Okay. That's just one of the, my dad was.
I remember that.
And,
The firefighters were involved in a lot of that.
yeah, and the police department,
Yeah,
the LA County
yeah,
sheriffs, the
yeah.
judges. There was a lot of people involved with that. My dad was one of the Footprinters, along with Judge David Asenson, who you know from Van Nuys.
I knew him actually.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
So-
sorry.
You distracted me, Gary.
I always I'm a very distracting person.
So it's all part of the premise that you got to get cases settled. I
Right.
keep saying that. I want to keep repeating it because this show is to help people make decisions.
Yes.
And if you can take the ego out of the decisions and recognize that you have control over the outcome by your own conduct, by your own consciousness, it's that law of cause and effect.
Yeah.
You know, things happen a year or 2 years later and you don't connect the effect with the cause.
Yeah.
And so you let it go by. And if you think you know what a jury is going to do, you don't.
Yeah.
If you think you know what a judge is going to do, you don't.
Well, I mean,
But you can get an inclination. If you can see sometimes. I remember a case where a judge was definitely not in favor of the plaintiff, and when the plaintiff was testifying, he was basically cross-examining him. And judges can do that. We're allowed to ask questions, believe it or not.
yeah.
If somebody's you want to know something, you just ask.
Scary.
You're really sitting there listening to, hoping for the best, and you're not always going to get it. And we've talked about this before. The same thing with verdicts. You can get a great verdict, and the judge decides, oh, you're not going to keep it.
They can throw
Taking
it out.
it away.
Yeah.
Taking it away. And believe it or not, they have the ability to add to a judgment. You didn't know that.
No.
If they feel that the jury didn't give you enough, it's called an additor. You can ask the judge to add something.
Or they'll take it away too, right? They can do either one.
Either one.
Wow.
And
What
so
power.
until that verdict is in and stamped and approved and the appeal is gone, you're at risk. And it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Because you eat yourself up in terms of how you feel about yourself. You're so anxious, you're so nervous about even going through the experience. It's just not worth it. I tell people, if you can avoid litigation, avoid it at all costs, because it could really drive you out. I've told the story of people who can't sleep at night.
Oh, yeah.
You were telling me the story about the Baldy the Clown.
Yeah, Baldy the Clown. It wasn't even, it was ridiculous. I'm getting sued for, having him on my show. He said I owed him money or promised him money, which I never did. And he sued me like right before the holidays, Christmas holiday, Jewish holidays, in December. And that whole month I was stressed out, and even though I knew I was going to people's court and I wasn't going to have to pay for the verdict or the whatever it was. It still was stressful.
I had a client who lost an enormous amount of weight. She couldn't afford to lose the weight to begin with. She was a slender woman.
Yes.
She couldn't eat.
Yeah.
Well, she was so upset about this litigation that she was in, and it hadn't even gone to trial yet.
Yeah.
Just every day, couldn't stop thinking of it. That was all that was on her mind, day after day after day.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? You have to say to yourself, when you become involved in the litigation world, and I've talked about that in the book, you have to take a deep breath and say, why am I here? What am I in this thing for? Why am I here? What can I do to extricate myself from this unpleasant, and it is unpleasant, environment, which is going to make you take all the money out of your piggy bank and all this with still high risk? That's when you sit down and you say to yourself, you know what, I got to put an end to this somehow.
I think even health-wise, it's more important health-wise because you're stressing out. Like I said, I couldn't even sleep.
Uncertainty.
Yes, it's just the stress factor of having somebody come after you or whatever. In my case, anyways, for no apparent reason.
Somebody got in touch with me recently and wanted to know the answer to this question: what's the difference between circumstantial evidence and direct evidence?
What is?
Well, one is an example. You're looking directly at something and you see it. That's direct.
Right.
Circumstantial evidence is a series of events or a series of facts, all of which lead you to make conclusions. You have to deduce something from whatever it is. The old story that we used to use is that somebody broke into the refrigerator in the kitchen and took out and ate some jelly. And who did it? Well, you go up and you have a number of kids. One kid's sitting there, and on the table is a towel, and you can see that there's jam on it. And you look closely, and then you look at the mouth, and you could see a little of the stuff still dribbling over there. But you didn't see him take it.
Right.
You didn't see him take it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing between a guess and an estimate. People always ask me, is there a difference between a guess and an estimate? Sure. A guess is if I asked you how big the dining room table was at my house. Well, you've been to my house, but let's assume you hadn't been to my house. I
haven't seen your dining room table.
So let's assume, I say, what size is the dining table? Well, you've never been there.
Right.
So if you were to give a number, you'd be guessing. But if I asked you what size the table was and you were sitting on the other side of the room and you could take a look over, say, well, it's about 8 by 9 or 6 by whatever the number turns out to be. That's an estimate. So people think about it when you're trying to prove your case. And remember those magic words, burden of proof. You have to prove your case. If it's a guess, the judge may not let it in.
Yeah.
Judge will not let it in, presumably, because it's deemed to be what they call speculative and conjectural. Those are the magic words. But if it's an estimate, it goes to the weight to give to the estimate. Many times something is admissible in evidence, like hearsay is in some cases.
Right.
And one week I will talk about all the exclusions to the hearsay rule.
By the way, you said hearsay is admissible in civil court?
It's admissible in small claims court.
Small claims court.
And it's admissible in restraining order court.
Okay.
Not admissible elsewhere.
Okay.
And so hearsay has got a real test that goes along with it, but most lawyers who know the law of evidence know what the exclusions are. I'm going to talk about those, but let me go back to the direct and circumstantial evidence.
Okay.
People say, well, he got convicted on circumstantial evidence. Well, probably 90% of the cases are decided that way. The reasonable person wouldn't have done what this person did. What's the assumption? The assumption is that he did it. The reasonable person wouldn't do it unless you could show that there's wide variations on whatever it is that occurred. And so the deductive logic comes into play along with good common sense when you're dealing with circumstantial evidence, but the judges may keep it out. If it's irrelevant or if it's too remote, we have a code called the evidence code. Some things get in, some things don't get in. If somebody has been doing something for a long period of time, and you can't prove they did it on this one occasion, you may, under certain exceptions, get in all the prior events as part of what's called a common custom and practice. And even though you have no evidence whatsoever at this time, but this person did this every day. Every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, they went to here, and they did it every week. Where was he on the Wednesday of this case? He's not going to be able to say he was in Chicago. This is what he did. This is what he did every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And so you don't know what the judge is going to do. Is the judge going to let it in? Is it too remote? Is it prejudicial? That's why we are so well versed, supposedly, on the rules of evidence. But when it comes down to admissibility of hearsay, we let it in because we have to in certain cases. We let it in, but the magic words are we give it the weight to which it's entitled. So you let it in and you say, I don't believe it. It's in, and you can't argue a case to a jury unless it's in evidence. So if something has been objected to and the objection has been sustained, the jury is often told, you disregard whatever you just heard. Unring the bell. It doesn't happen.
That's hard to do that, isn't it?
Well, good trial strategy is you plan for that.
Okay.
You can ask, I'm not so sure it's totally ethical, but you can ask a question you know is objectionable. You're waiting for the shoe to drop. Sometimes it doesn't drop. The person doesn't object. There are some lawyers who don't object to much of anything. There's a real school of thought as to you should object to everything that's important. Others say don't object unless it's really necessary to do it, because you don't want to get anybody pissed off at you. And that's why you have to think carefully. I never really objected a lot. I always felt that the jury didn't want to be there, and if it's overruled, you don't look that smart. And so unless I felt it was significant or relevant, I didn't object that much.
Makes sense.
It's just trial strategies.
Right.
And so circumstantial evidence is as good as any other evidence. It's like the difference between an oral and a written contract. The evidence is the same. The weight you give it, different story. And the problem with circumstantial evidence is if you break the chain of events that you're using as the premise for your theory that this is what happened at the end of the day, if you're missing a link and the chain is broken, you don't get to the end.
Right.
You can get to the end, but the argument made by opposing counsel is
Doesn't stand
they
up.
said where's the proof of this?
Right.
Where is that's a significant consideration, and that's what you do. You got to listen very carefully, and you got to be very aware, because as lawyers, that jury is watching you all the time, all the time.
I bet.
When I told you the story about the juror that gave me the juror's notebook after the trial was over,
Yeah.
she had written in there, he's wearing a nice suit, but I wouldn't trust him.
Was that you?
No. I mean, maybe.
No, it wasn't.
But she went our way, though. So
Yeah,
I guess
it wasn't you.
That was the same lawyer in the Riverside case where we had the drunk judge. Same lawyer.
Really?
Yeah, he used to wear nice suits, but I wouldn't trust him.
Yeah.
He's not around anymore. I got along with him great socially, but he had no integrity at all. Zero, none. And maybe he paid the price for that.
Right.
But he was a good lawyer.
Yeah.
He was a very good lawyer. But jurors decide whether they like you or they don't like you. Believe it or not. It may not be overt, but you can...
Of course they're going to form opinions. They're human.
And the clients, too.
Exactly.
They like you, they don't like you. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit more next week. But I just wanted to say about Stormy Daniels, that judge is already giving you an indication where this case is going. He's going to probably find that the contract is legitimate. The arbitration provision takes place. They have an arbitration quietly behind closed doors, because that's what it says in the agreement. and that's how it gets resolved. That judge is not in Stormy's favor from my first perception of what the rulings have been so far. So we'll talk more about that maybe next week.
Sounds good. And if you want to ask Judge Herb Dodell a question, go to askjudgeherb@gmail.com and get his book From the Trench to the Bench, now on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm being revised as we speak.
Great. I'll see you next week, Judge.
Okay.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.